Epik Mellon podcast, conversations with the real humans behind broadband networks, cybersecurity, and the future of communications. Brought to you by QA Cafe.
Apologies in advance for the audio quality of this, because I don't know how much noise it's creating. But hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Epik Mellon podcast. I am Jason Wallace from QA Cafe. I'm here with Peter from, before I say from, it's embed, exactly. But there's more to Peter's story.
Not so much. I mean, the name says it. So we mostly work on embedded
Right.
hardware.
Okay.
So that's
And Mika from F-Secure, and we are at NetworkX. And if you remember, this time last year, I was also recording another podcast with Chow on the other side of this room. And came out really cool, and I like doing them. I like doing them like this because this is way more exciting for people.
indeed. And Zhao just left the building.
Oh man, you could have walked by and made a cameo.
That would have been amazing.
But I want to have you both on just because there's so much interesting stuff going on here. And there's a number of topics that I've never covered. Well, that's not true. I talk about the stuff that we know about a lot, but never in this context. But sort of the format of the show. Before I get started, because this is brought to you by QA Guide, I have to remind everybody that the opinions of anybody who I'm talking to right now do not reflect those face ownership, and that goes the same with these guys and their respective companies, just so we can cover our asses in the event that we say something controversial.
And now, all lawyers, please leave the podcast.
You can stop now.
Exactly.
So I've been having a really great 2 days. It's been so insanely busy here. I keep telling people that I haven't stopped talking for like 3 days, which I know is a huge surprise. But so I don't know if how familiar with either of you are with the format of the show, but there isn't one, right? And I really just want to the whole point of this is to humanize us people who are behind the way things work, right? And to get people to know that we're not robots, right?
Yeah, that's true. It's still humans doing all this work, which explains a lot.
Yeah, right?
Yeah,
Which has come up with enough verticals.
Yeah.
Speaking of humans doing all this work together, that's half of the security problem.
Yeah. It is humans who do all the scamming and all the malicious stuff mostly.
Right. Mostly. Now it's getting to the point where it's not.
Yeah. That's true.
So I mean, just wherever you guys want to do this, I'm always curious about how people got in the industry and if it was straightforward or not. Right?
Oh.
I've had people who were former construction workers that decided to become networking people.
I think, I start, before entering cybersecurity, I was working surprise in the telco side. So I was more working the enterprise side at the time when we were kind of IP telephony and IP video conferencing was hot. So we were building these kind of enterprise communication services.
Right.
And people move over in the industry, and companies come and go. And one of my ex-colleagues, at that time working at F-Secure, gave me a call and said, well, we would have this kind of a thing open here. Would you be interested in joining? And I said, well, okay, yes. Why not? Why not make a move to the software and cybersecurity industry? So combined with the networking and internets and everything. So it's been.
What about before that? Engineering?
And I was studying engineering, like communications and computer science and stuff like that. So it was the now Aalto University in Espoo, Finland, but called Teknillinen Korkeakoulu, TKK at the time. But anyway, that kind of a polytechnic university stuff.
Cool. Because we always say that sort of like there's not a lot of universities that specifically have communications or networking program as part of their CS. There's some do.
Yeah. Maybe it's background also from like Nokia and stuff like that from Finland, so it kind of was important at the time.
Finland, where the networking engineers come from. Peter, what about you?
Yeah, my career took a lot of turns, to be honest, because it's really. No, it was in the beginning when I was finishing school. I wasn't sure if I should go and work on my artistic side, or if I should work on the more mathematical side.
Yeah.
So funny story was when I was still in school, we had some buddies and we did make computer games. So we started a project which took I think 3 years with without hardware acceleration, 3D engine on the 386, real-time shading, stuff like that.
And that game became Call of Duty.
For the demo scene thing. Yeah.
Unfortunately not. But anyway, but in this game I was just doing graphics. So I was designing 3D worlds and all this stuff we needed for the game.
Living the dream.
Kind of, but I mean, if you live your dream at a certain point, you find out it's not so dreamlike anymore.
I understand that 1,000,000%.
And yeah, and I mean, at a certain point in my life, I had a family. I had to sustain, so I said, yeah, okay, well, I studied computer science, so I got into the industry. So typical thing, doing PC stuff, support, and everything. And then sometimes in the early 90s, this thing called internet popped up. So everybody needed to be on. So we started working with software for internet services, firewalling, etc. And then we really stumbled into Wi-Fi by accident.
Everybody did.
Yeah. And our first commercial project.
Wi-Fi stumbled into us.
Yeah, and over
megabit per second, something.
Right. Yeah, so and from there this all started, and we got into embedded system. We met some amazing guys from OpenWT and DDWT at that time. So we started collaborating and focusing on this stuff, and now we know something.
Yeah.
At least that's what we're telling people.
And for those people who are not intimately familiar with what OpenWT is, it is one of those things that's out there that very much affects how it is that you are getting on the internet, because it's on a lot of home gateways, and it's basically like it's was the original open source solution that you can port onto other home gateways. And now it's very different. In the beginning, it was a community of nerds who were just putting it over whatever firmware they had before, because they would rather than this one.
And it starts from the links, GPL violation thing.
Exactly.
It was the hardware warranty spoilers.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, once it was out of the box, you couldn't get it back.
Yeah. No.
So it really got a life of its own. It's amazing if you think about today, that if you get a vendor SDK from a chipset vendor, you look into it. It's in most cases it's OpenWT.
Right.
Okay, they forked it, they modified it, but at the end, that's what it is. Which means you can imagine how many boxes in the world technically running OpenWT.
That's a lot. That's many.
Yeah, and some more.
Consequently, and I think I've talked about this on the show before about gateways getting more powerful and cheaper, but also becoming the primest target of hackers, right? And not that this is any fault of OpenWT. It's not. It's like it's whatever they did after that. But it's become huge, right? It's like almost like the prime target, right? Because they're able to scan more completely available for things that are open. And is it like I've heard a lot of horror stories, I guess. So I would love for you to sort of flesh out some of those horror stories. So not so everybody shuts off their gateways right now as we're talking, but
what exactly was it? Maybe missed a bit in the beginning.
Just how because not just that there's been standardization, but because we're going to talk eventually about the fact that gateways became and so they're a bigger security target.
Yeah,
right?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of resources, edge compute resources in the world now.
Yeah.
Like, so it's a kind of a legit target, and it's not necessarily. One thing that is happening is like those gateways used as enterprise, kind of residential IPs to hide your activities.
Yep.
We've seen those sometimes when actually they are compromised so that they can be used as proxies.
Right.
So that whatever malicious activity happens, it looks like it comes from the residential users,
Right.
which makes it also harder to block because it's all over the edge if those kind of devices are everywhere. So that's an interesting scenario. Yeah, this has happened. And of course, people do have assets in their home networks that might be interesting. On the other hand, a single family or single individual doesn't necessarily have that much assets that a company, for example. So it's not. It is in a way, even if you go after some effort and compromise a home,
right?
Still, there's a limited amount of things you can monetize as a cyber criminal because it's
so for the most part they're trying to use them as bots.
Yes, they kind of harness them for something else.
Right. And because the gateways are now basically as powerful as a fully functioning computer.
Yeah.
And a lot of bandwidth.
Yeah, exactly. So if you really want to run a denial of service attack, hey, where's the 10 gig XGS PON gateway? I mean, you need way less to cause a lot of harm.
Right. Thanks a lot, fiber guys.
Yeah, thanks.
No, that's true. But like, so let's talk about the evolution of that a little bit. Because, so you've seen OpenWrt evolve to the state that it is now, to the point where, that software is everywhere. And, the power is everywhere. And now it's getting to the point where in other places to standardize that so that people like us can, get in there and solve that problem. Right. So like, I've only been behind the scenes until now in a lot of it, but like, where did that evolution come from? Like, how has it got to that point?
It's very, very difficult to say. I mean, first of all, the fact that you find OpenWrt everywhere, I think was from the beginning that it was very, very open, very flexible. So it was a natural choice for many engineers to say, hey, I want to build something. I need something that's easy to use, well supported, etc. And at a certain point, I cannot tell you exactly when the chipset makers were picking it up for their SDKs, because they found it's much easier to build an SDK based upon something that already has a lot of functionalities.
Right.
So it was about minimizing the effort.
The actual use of open source.
Right. It is what it is.
Yep.
And then by the time we did see way better chipset support. So I think for OpenWrt, a turning point was ATH9K, was the first open source Wi-Fi driver for Ethers at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent piece of work. And what Ethers did was very interesting, because they were contacting several open source developers and asked them, hey, can we jointly build an open source driver? Yeah. And the driver still is one of the best pieces of work we've seen. It is, to be honest. And then later, after the acquisition by Qualcomm, they continued this approach with the ATH10, K12, 11, K12K now, and 13, I think, also around the corner. And also others like MediaTek picked it up. And so it became kind of an industry movement, because at the end, they found out if you leverage the community in the right way and collaborate with the community, you can build better products with less effort.
Right.
I mean, this is what it is all about. And also, the community gives you something interesting also for security, which is the review process.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I always explain it like that. If you build a new product, you need continuous integration and automated testing. But you need a community, because what we found out, if you put some software into the community, people start doing strange things with it. Yeah? But that, at the end, shows you all the corner cases.
Yeah.
And an automated test bed can never get rid of it.
Yeah, I mean, the best way to test is in production. I know, I get it.
Right. and you get this.
We're all guinea pigs.
Yeah, indeed. And you you get those strange emails and somebody's complaining, this is not working. You're like, what the hell are you doing? And then they're explaining what they're doing. You're like, oh, we never thought about that. Yeah. But this is really good for hardening. Yeah. Hardening the software. Yeah. And also it's, if you have open software, it has two sides of the story. Because if an attacker wants to do something, then it's very easy to review the software and find maybe some parts that might be vulnerable.
Right.
On the other hand, other developers reviewing the code can find the same. So it's like, I like security by obscurity.
Right.
Yeah. I prefer security by a transparent, open process, because then you can really see, okay, this is how we evolved. Yeah. It's a clear process. And if something happens, you know how to work with it. I mean, we have the industry stories about backdoors and switches.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is for me the worst example. So somebody, had the great idea to build a backdoor into a software, thinking, okay, if nobody knows about it, then nothing's going to happen. Well, as we all know, the guys always find it.
Well, it's like, it's, what is it? It's the analogy of why do cables get tangled, right? It's like the number of possible untangled states is 1, whereas the number of possible tangled states is infinite.
Right.
So eventually somebody's going to find that.
Yeah.
Has there ever been an attempt of a supply chain attack in OpenWRT? I think because that's sometimes happening in open source. It sometimes tries to slot in something there.
Well, this is actually I've never heard about a case, which does not mean that there was no case, because if it would happen, probably the people wouldn't make it public, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And it would be gone by now if somebody would spot it.
Yeah. I mean, the development process are well documented. Every commit is documented, but we've seen attempts in other open source projects to take over certain components. I've read about a case in Linux that was really, really bad, where the maintainer actually didn't want to maintain the package anymore. And then some guy stepped in, said, hey, and after a while he said, I could take over that. And then they really tried to bring in malicious code into a very important tool in Linux. And the impact, if they would have succeeded, would have been a mess.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And that's why I think in every open source project, it's really, really important that we have maintainers who are active, who are motivated, and enough people who are doing the review process.
Right.
Yeah? Because not everything about open source is great. Yeah.
I know.
Fair enough.
You know my opinions.
I know.
Well, actually, along the lines of those opinions, is it happening? Is that really happening? So, like, here's an example, right? Because very often when you guys catch something, if it's a big time manufacturer problem on like an end device, you're feeding that information back to them.
Sure.
Usually,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, of course.
So either they do something about it or they don't, right? But
Usually they do happily, but
is it working better on the gateway side of things now that there is this community kind of working together on that?
Yeah. I mean, my experience in the OpenWRT community is that it's all about trust. So that's not perfect, but let's say if you work with these guys for 10 years, and you know them all,
right?
And somebody's sending code, then the code comes from a trusted source.
Right. You heard it here first, folks. It's the human factor.
Let's say if there's a newbie you've never heard of, and he's sending a patch, every maintainer will have a closer look to figure out, okay, what's the for simple reasons, to figure out what's the code quality. Yeah.
Right.
And then if you see in the review process, okay, this is not good, then there's a forth and back process to optimize the code that works. The critical part actually is, imagine by human engineering, somebody would be able to take over the identity of a trusted developer. Think about that.
That's the next level.
That's why we have to meet in person and hear together.
And we have to cut this out because it could get people to strange ideas. So that I mean, it's really something. We have actually in every software development team, it's not only open source. Even inside a company, let's say somebody at a chipset vendor, somebody's able to take over the identity of one of the lead developers. They could use so much harm.
Yeah.
Which brings us back to the end of the story. The human factor is the most critical.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I don't know. It makes me happy that that's true, because I'm very passionate about that. It's the reason why I'm doing the show. Because there's so many of those things. There's so many things about the fact that we're here, right? The fact that we even have trade shows in the first place and want to exchange, right? Because that's the only way. It's like there was a lot of things that happened during COVID.
Right.
And one of the things that I found amazing is that I thought that after it was revealed that we didn't all have to come to places like this, that maybe trade shows would stop. But the opposite happened.
Mm-hmm.
They came back with a vengeance. Like, they're like way more common, way busier than they ever were, right?
But there's a simple reason for that.
No. In all seriousness, no. Like, it's like that's where those connections are made.
Exactly. And I mean, this is, I entirely agree. This exchange, even if at the evening, if you have a talk, a chat over a beer, sometimes you hit an interesting topic and say, hey, guys, we have to follow up this. If you only meet on the online,
Right.
This factor is completely gone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And human communication isn't just the face and the voice. It's your posture, gestures, atmosphere, everything.
Until AI can take that too.
Yeah.
All of us.
Sure. Like in the workplace, at least for me, it's kind of the threshold of kind of throwing an idea to a colleague and say, what do you think about it? Is much lower.
You can spin a chair around.
Yeah, or meet face to face at the coffee machine or something. I maybe wouldn't open the discussion.
Right.
Hey, I have this thought now, random thought. So it's kind of.
Are you in the office full time, or do you guys?
I'm mostly at the office because I'm 5 kilometers away from the office, and usually like to bike in the morning.
You can run a bike.
Yeah, something like that. So it's kind of I often come to the office. If it's not horrible, it's not icy, or so then I'm not biking.
You're all over.
Yeah, I'm traveling a lot, so it's but I love to see people in person. Yeah, I love that. By the way, since we talked about the human factor and you mentioned AI, there was something interesting revealed. I don't know exactly if the story is right, but I remember that after ChatGPT 3 was released, they made kind of a benchmark about the quality of the responses.
Yep.
They did the same benchmark 6 months later, and they found out that ChatGPT got dumber.
It did.
Yeah.
And then it got better.
Yeah. But actually, I was thinking, man, we are even messing up AI, right?
You can't take the people out of the system.
You can't.
Well, it's funny. Craig gets on my case all the time for using AI to do content, right? Because he, as a fellow marketing guy, he's like, "We're going to make us obsolete." I'm like, "No. You have to still edit it because its only job in LLM is to tell you what you wanted to hear." And so you have all these examples of people being like, "Oh, I got ChatGPT to become insanely racist or whatever," right? And it's like, no, that's because you asked it to do that. Is that right? Oh, thank you.
I mean, all those models are trained with data we generate. And honestly, it sometimes scares me.
Right.
Because, I mean, how can you do that to an AI?
No, poor thing.
Only AI deserves that, right?
So,
Yeah, that's an aspect of ethics in AI that I haven't really thought of. What about the AI?
again,
Right. Nothing.
it doesn't get happy, it doesn't get sad, it just runs programs. So on that topic of sort of, because obviously, so F-secure software does a lot of things. One of the things it does is sit on a gateway and look for bugs. And it's not just hacking.
Mm.
It's also phishing attempts and
Yeah.
stuff like that thing. And so has it gotten to the point where you guys can sort of tell if it's a bot doing phishing attempts versus
Yeah, well, we are doing kind of traffic analysis on the bots. So there we can identify certain patterns in the traffic flows, but if oftentimes a scam attempt is a single message or something,
yeah,
and it's end-to-end encrypted, usually while in transit, so it's pretty hard to tell from a network kind of metadata point of view, like what is it inside the message.
Yeah.
So
how do you end up catching something?
So we, for example, if it's on, well, we are not only working on the gateway. So for example, we have but anyway, in the gateways, we do things like whatever metadata we can get our hands on, we use. So for example, SNI could reveal the service name identification in HTTPS, could reveal a phishing host name that's been recently registered host name. And then there is somebody clicks a link and we see that host name and it's very new and looks like it's slightly cryptic. There's a lot of entropy in the string or something. So those kinds of things we can use to say, okay, this looks fishy and block it or want to use things like
playing whack-a-mole.
Yeah. So yeah.
But this is really surprising for me. I get a lot of phishing emails.
Yeah.
And the quality is not getting better.
Well, because they're using.
Yeah. I mean, on the one hand, I'm really, I think, why is the quality so bad?
Yeah.
On the other hand, I'm glad it is.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it would be much more difficult to identify.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest threat we are seeing is really phishing and social engineering, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is usually in different attack vectors combined, and by technology, we cannot prevent that.
Right.
Right. I mean, it could even be somebody calling on the phone and asking some question, then putting things together, and we on the edge on the gateway, our options are limited. Yeah?
Right.
We can do our best, but there is no way to protect people completely.
Right.
I don't know how we should do that.
Right.
So I think security is always, you have to have tools, but you also have to educate people.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I was talking about this with one of my friends on a podcast who works for. She works for the biggest, basically the company that owns Johnson & Johnson.
Okay.
She's cybersecurity.
Wow.
She's on the podcast. We talked about how you can't build a perfect wall. You have to also sort of act as if you were going to get it.
Right. But this is super interesting. I once had a discussion about security and hardening and everything, and software designs. So the conclusion was always build things in the knowing that it's gonna have faults.
Yeah.
And so
that's a super good point.
Yeah.
Right.
Because this raises the awareness that you say, okay, I know whatever product I built, it's not going to be perfect. So we have to think about how we are dealing with the defects.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And this is something I think we also need to get more awareness in the industry, because on the management level, people always think, yeah, just fix the bugs and then it's good. But there always will be bugs.
Right. That's basically where Agile came from.
Yeah.
Is that concept.
Exactly. Yeah. And knowing that for instance, in terms of security, yeah, you could say, okay, a service just needs to be hardened.
Mm-hmm.
But when you know you cannot harden the service to 100%, then you know, okay, it could be hacked. So let's say maybe we run the service with limited privileges.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's getting hacked, then the attacker cannot cause too much damage.
Right.
And then you can say, okay, but my underlying system to, let's say, limit the attack vector is also not perfect.
Yeah.
So what's the next layer? So in security, we're always talking about layers. And I mean, honestly, in my opinion, your product just needs to be way more secure than a competitor's product. Because in that case,
It's like being the slowest person running from zombies.
yeah, exactly.
But the layers, well, because we also do stuff beyond the gateway, so that's kind of the layer thinking as well. So speaking of scams and this kind of social engineering, so we just introduced a feature in a mobile app, in the iOS app, that kind of analyzes the message content, the SMS content that is used for phishing. So in addition to links, but what is actually being said, like with machine learning and AI, and that we try to then kind of catch it there where if we can get our hands on the message like we can on iOS now, so then we try to kind of mitigate that threat on that layer in addition to the network.
I didn't know that. I'm going to have to download that now, because what's happening right now is I'll cache this with a. I'm going to defend myself for a second. I'm a registered Republican, but because back in 2008 I voted for Ron Paul in the primaries. In New Hampshire, you have to go and unregister
Okay.
at a very specific time, or else you're always that. Right? So I never did because I'm lazy. Now I get Trump text messages constantly, like 10 a day.
Wow. 10 a day.
Here's the thing: they're all phishing attempts, right?
No way.
They're all phishing attempts. They're all rando things being like donate now, but they're not legit. None of them are actual like political action committees that actually exist, right?
Oh my goodness.
And it's getting so exhausting that like if I have a way to finally eliminate that, wonderful.
You can give it a spin.
Yeah. True.
Yeah. But it's that attack vector has been very interesting to me, because my wife, for similar reasons, totally different reasons, because we're both libertarians now, was a registered Democrat, so she gets the Democrat ones, right? But they're not nearly as bad in terms of trying to do phishing attempts.
Okay. Seriously?
Yeah, it's like night and day. So it's clearly like, I don't know if it's a certain demographic that's easier to scam or something, but like,
I mean, that's a real problem now with people. It's in addition to kind of malicious apps or stuff like that. But this is like 10 a day.
Yeah.
Well, you don't get 10 malicious apps a day on your phone.
Yeah, but I mean, if you think it a few steps further, so people have a certain threshold for information. So let's say if somebody says, "Hey, come on, let's flood that person with SMS, email, calls, whatever," yeah. At a certain point, the person will break down and reveal something.
Yeah, right. No, exactly.
And I mean,
this is works.
Yeah, exactly.
And they wouldn't do it if it didn't work.
Yeah, and I think as you said, by technology, we can at least do something to reduce it. We cannot eliminate it,
right?
But let's say we can get it back to a level where a human can handle it. Yeah, I mean, at least that's what we should do.
Yeah, agreed. Yep. Eventually, people have to look at it. We talk about that with packet captures at Security all the time, right? It's like, because when we were making packet viewer, which is basically the guts of our product, Cloud Shark, ripped out so that people can OEM it and put it in their own product, right? We can ask you guys about that, by the way. And actually, Luke, a long time ago, one of the open WRT guys, he's the one who put a packet capture and contract upload functionality in WRT. It's already there.
Cool. Like it.
When we were talking to people about because what happened was, we very often ran into people who wanted to use contract, but they didn't want most of it. They just wanted the packet viewer side, right? So like Meraki, right? They originally integrated that they were uploading the captures to contract, right? So you have to have a contract system, blah, 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 blah. Didn't work out that well. So we made packet viewer kind of with their use case in mind, and now it's embedded in Meraki pod system, right? So they natively can do packet captures in the Meraki dashboard, right? Now, when we were doing sort of the customer discovery focus, because obviously we love the Verizon guys and their own previous podcast, but we don't want to be the only customers of packet dealer. The number one answer we always got was, we hate packet captures, but we know that we have to have them in, right? Because exactly that, right? Eventually, like, you can have all the automation in the universe, but eventually you have to look at the logs, you have to look at the stuff, and there has to be a human being that's
Right. Yeah, but also here, if we can build better tools to process information, to pre-process it, to make it easier to spot the critical parts, and even using machine learning, let's say, to assist.
Yep.
To say, hey, this looks, but still, machine learning is for me something, the technology is great, but my concern is always the data.
Yeah. Right.
If
garbage in, garbage out. It'll always be
exactly,
true.
exactly. So this is really, really a tricky part.
And the other thing that it helps sort of solve about trying to make tools that make that easier, or at least more accessible, is the problem that every single industry has, especially some, but it's getting better, is that there's basically, like, just because of the way that generations worked, right? There's a whole bunch of people who are aging out of the industry, all industries, right?
Oh yeah.
And a whole bunch of really green people who don't have the expertise, right? And there's like nobody in the middle.
So I think bridging that like knowledge gap.
Right.
Oh my goodness. So I have to stay 20 years.
Yes. Please.
Okay. So
I don't think you will.
no, I have no
I
intention
think you
to.
love this too much.
Yeah, that's true, but don't tell anyone. Oh, we are on a podcast. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, but it's really something. I was recently talking with people in the IEEE, and they said, yeah, we have a problem in the working groups because all the guys, for instance, the Wi-Fi, the 802.11 working group, they have people that started the working group, and they know everything.
Yeah.
And they're now coming to an age where they are going to retire. And at that point, all that knowledge is going to be lost.
Yeah.
And that's scary.
And it's super scary.
Yeah.
It's like, people, again, I talk about this on the show often about how the internet is kind of held together with duct tape and strings, and that duct tape and strings is often the people.
It's true. That's true.
So if it's the one guy that's maintaining an open source project somewhere,
Yeah, the internet started like early 90s, well, earlier, but in kind of as a consumer thing. So it's kind of, it's not that old.
I mean, I also see this, for instance, in OpenWT. Yeah. So you can still see that a lot of the guys who were there from the beginning, they still do a lot of the heavy lifting. The good news is there are some newbies coming, very talented. So this is a good thing.
Right.
Yeah. But, as with most open source projects, it's a day's job.
Yeah.
And the question at the end is, who's doing the funding for that?
Yeah.
It's also very critical because everybody loves to use open source. That, I mean, who's gonna fund the development?
Yeah.
Actually, this is
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's the same thing with things like Wireshark, or things with like Suricata, right?
Yeah.
Like, that is an open source set of security rules, right?
Yeah.
But if the funding ever went away, like,
yeah. I mean, it's not like a hobby you do in maybe on a weekend.
for some of them,
Yep. For some of them, if you see the amount of code that has been built, and what we found that at a certain point we can bridge that with some industry partnerships, where industry players say, "Hey, we need this for this use case. We need some software. Is it possible to bring it into the project?" And then often it's like, yeah, it's too specific, but if we do it smartly, we can maybe bring back 80% of that into the project.
Right.
And that's beneficial for both sides.
I see.
Because this 80% then is maintained by the community. So your maintenance cost is going down significantly.
Right.
and you have the whole review process. You have other people consuming that, and it was quite interesting. We recently did a project for upstream driver development, and then one of our devs got an email from another company saying, "Yeah, we are using this chipset. I stumbled into your work. This looks really good. Would you mind me sending some patches?"
You're like, would I?
We have to think now. But this is the interesting part, how it works. You suddenly have people who say, "Yeah, I'm using that, and this is super interesting. Can I help?"
That's cool.
Because they have a benefit, and then they also contribute something back. And then they say, "Yeah, in this part we already did some work. Have a look at the code, and then you can incorporate it." So altogether, things are getting smoother.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So in a certain level, it works, but I think the awareness in the whole industry is not there yet.
Right. And well, it's a blind spot kind of thing.
Right.
And you're like, oh, well, somebody's going to keep doing this. It doesn't have to be me.
Yeah. And another thing, for instance, if you talk about security and traffic analysis, what I think what we're lacking are some standardized interfaces for that.
Yeah.
So I don't know if this would be an option, but we recently did a lot of work with eBPF.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This is fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
You just write a small program and say, okay, this type of traffic I want to get into my service, and this is a great tool to do things.
Right.
If we would work on security APIs based on that, then the security companies could say, okay, we're plugging in here. Yeah, it's standardized. You could even have a container, linking to that interface.
Yeah.
Because what I dislike in many cases, we see too much reinventing the wheel. Yeah, because there's no standard for it, so everybody's technically building the same infrastructure.
That's especially true in the package space.
With unique bugs as well.
Right. Yeah. So it's something I would because if you think about how much resources we are wasting on doing this, which we actually could put into innovation. I would love to see more innovation in the industry. Yeah. And
I think the kernels in the home gateways are starting to get to a level where actually something like that. We're kind of looking at it a bit, but no implementation as of now. But still, but it's like
it's a power problem against people too. And we've also run across people sort of thinking about it wrong, in my opinion, anyway. Because they get told, for example, that you have to report all your network data. But it's like a 10 gig link. That means instead of what you're talking about, where it's like, okay, maybe if we sort of standardized how to think about when and how, what to capture,
how many and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, even here we could use machine learning. Yeah. To say, okay, the level of capture of packet capturing is adjusted on what's going on on the box. Yeah. So you could say, okay, now looks all normal. Of course, there might be some cases you slip, but in normal use cases, you could say, well, I'm sending 1% of the traffic for analysis. But then something's going on. Yeah. You could even have in the cloud a service running saying, oh, at the moment, some attacks are ongoing. So I send some signals to my boxes to send more.
Right.
Temporarily. Yeah. Just to analyze the case. So we could really build intelligent systems to adjust the amount of data we are collecting.
Right. And I have a feeling that there are some people working on that, and there's also some people.
We have no idea. We're just doing that, right?
But on the flip side, there are other people who make a lot of money on the fact that they are able to sell hardware that does capture at 10.
Yeah. But I mean, on the hardware side, I mean, this week there was a strong request, which is here in Europe. So gateways should be more power saving. Yeah. Okay. Now comes the interesting thing. I recently heard a talk about FEs you need for filters for Wi-Fi cards. The guy said, the problem of today's Wi-Fi 7 power consumption is not the chip. It's the radio circuitry. because we're still using 20 years old technology.
Probably, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So and then we're talking about, oh yeah, we have to reduce the CPU cycles, but it's like you have a let's say you have a LED light, and you're trimming it to use less power, and then you have a big oven heating all the time, full power. You're like, yeah, we need to save some energy. And I was like, oh, this is interesting actually. And this is also a pattern we often see in discussions. People are so focused on something they try to optimize, they completely forget about all the other shit going on.
Right, which comes down to another bunch of human factors about where their interests lie and where their
Yes.
silos are and all that.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
I mean, we run into that constantly.
Always. Yeah, but I mean, it's even if you talk about that, I think also a human factor is we need to talk. We need to find common ground. Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, there are always conflicting interests, but I mean, it's always possible to find a solution everybody has a benefit in,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. That's standards.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
All right. This is great. Like I told you, time would fly in like 2 seconds, right?
Indeed.
But out there on the show floor, we have beers waiting for us. So I'm gonna go get those. And
That's a good reason, right?
thank you guys so much. This
It's
is
a
super
pleasure.
fun.
It's fun.
That's why I do it. Yeah.
Thank you.
But above all, well, first of all, do subscribe to this if you got this. We'll have a lot more things that come out of this short. And above all, own the nerdy things you love and have fun doing.